Good morning, everyone. So today we're going to be working on connecting spirals. I want to think about spirals, rotations, largely through our primary load-bearing joints, hips, shoulders. Both hip and shoulder have rotator cuff muscles. Those rotator cuff muscles aid in rotation. They also, for the shoulder specifically, they help maintain the ball of the humerus in the socket of the shoulder, which is important since the socket is shallow and there's lots of room for that bone to the ball of the humerus to slide out. So those rotator cuff muscles help keep it in, but they're also rotator muscles. They help with rotation of that humerus and they help keep that humeral head in alignment. You also have rotator muscles of the hip. Now they're not responsible for keeping the hip in the ball, because for the hip it's a one-to-one relationship. The cup over the ball is really deep, so the ball of the hip is unlikely to pop out unless you do something devastating. But that rotator action of the hip is really important, and it's important in terms of gait mechanics. So I'm going to kind of bring in a concept of tensegrity. This is a tensegrity model. This is a model that's supposed to be a replica for our hips. These are our feet, and this is the pelvis. And I'm going to kind of give you a quick reading of the definition of tensegrity just to kind of help out as well. So bear with me as I read. Tensegrity is a balance of forces that reach a stable but dynamic equilibrium. It manifests when a continuous web of attractive forces pulling inward directed forces, is counterbalanced by several non-continuous repulsive forces pushing out. So the balance between inward focus and outward focus of force. This balance results in a system with maximum efficiency of spatial organization and energy expenditure. These forces can be non-visible, such as gravity, or visible, such as wooden sticks and rubber bands, which is what we have here. Tensegrity can manifest in anything from the smallest atoms attracting and repelling each other to planets, stars, and solar systems. So this is a model of tensegrity. Our bodies are a model of tensegrity. The sticks in this model represent our bones. The rubber bands represent our fascia, muscles, ligaments, tendons, cartilage, all the soft tissue. And if you look at this model, none of the sticks are touching each other. None of the bones are touching each other. And that's the same thing for our body, unless we're talking about some of the fused bones, such as in our skull. All of our bones float in space. There's fluid in between them, synovial fluid that helps maintain lubrication and keeps friction the heat of friction at a minimum. And when those bones get tight and compressed, say if I pull these guys over here, you will notice that it makes a change in the system elsewhere. That is going to be similar to our body. I want to bring this into the concept of spirals. Our core is where we maintain a main tension pattern to keep our body rigid in space, especially with gait mechanics. And we have these nice spirals through our arms and our legs that are there to help to absorb energy and release energy. And when we go from pushing off through our back leg, our hip is externally spiraled. Our opposite arm is more externally spiraled. External spiral, opposite shoulder also is going to be externally spiraled. As we bring that leg up into our heel strike, we're going to get an internal rotation. The knee is going to track more internally, so we're getting that spiral all the way in. We also have a rotation in our core. Our opposite shoulder is also coming forward, and we have this same internal rotational spiral. So contralaterally, one side of my body is spiraling internally, while the opposite side is spiraling externally. And those spirals are loading and unloading into basically the rubber bands, those rotator cuff muscles and other soft tissues, which have a lot of elastic properties to them, like a rubber band. So they absorb energy So when we unspiral, it helps to release that energy. And when we get stuck in a state of internal or external spiral in either of these areas, it's going to create an equal response elsewhere in the body, and usually within that same side pattern or in the oppositional pattern. So that was a lot. Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. We're going to bring that into our class today and see if we can kind of get a feel for how those spirals relate to each other. Noticing if there's a reduction in range of motion in one spiral and how that relates to its oppositional spiral. So with all that, let's get started. So we're going to start in a standing position. First thing I want to do is kind of just get our breath organized. So we're going to start with our crocodile breaths, making nice big C shapes with our hands. The thumbs we're placing into our low back musculature. Index fingers I want wrapping around into the abdominal musculature. And the palms are going to be pressing in to our sides. Hands are going to be placed below the rib cage and above the hip bone. I want to be in that nice meaty section of the abdominal wall. And I want to think about that abdominal wall like a balloon or a crocodile. When we breathe, I want it to expand in all directions. Into the belly, into the low back, and out through the sides. So on our inhale, we're trying to expand that balloon to press out against our hands, into the thumbs, into the index fingers, and into the palms. On our exhale, we're going to draw our navel into the spine and we're going to squeeze our hands in order to create resistance for that inhale so that we can maximize that inhale. We're going to do a good 6 slow inhale and exhale. Think like 3 to 4 count in both directions. And with each inhale, we're seeing if we can expand that balloon a little bit wider. So feel that core fill up on the exhale. Full expression of that breath. Draw the navel into the spine. Allow the hands to clench down. And then immediately fill that balloon up. Can you feel it start to stretch out on that inhale? This is a great breath to notice. Are there areas within that abdominal wall that expand more? And are there other areas that expand less? And this will be important once we start to connect those spirals, especially if we have some restrictions in spirals across the body. We'll notice that those restrictions in the spiral are going to be related to areas in which we do not get as much access to breath in that abdominal wall. So we're going to continue to kind of breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth, just continuing to work with that crocodile breath. Now we're going to get into a little bit of our 6 walks. So we're going to take right foot, I'm stepping out slightly in front but away from the body and just placing the ball of the big toe on the floor. I want the heel off the floor and the outside edge of the pinky toe, so toe side of the ball of foot off the floor. Knee is going to track in. We're simply shifting weight and feeling the load into the ball of the big toe and then light push off as we extend that foot. And we're doing good 5 to 10 reps. As you feel that load on the ball of the foot, allow the arch to absorb it. I'm keeping the heel off the floor, but I want to feel a little bit of a stretch in the arch of the foot. I want to think of that arch like a spring. Can you feel the spring load? And then can you unload that spring? And how does that spring feel? Is it stiff? Or does it feel fairly dynamic? After about 5 to 10, we're going to continue this, but now we're going to let the heel come down and kiss the floor and then release off the floor as we unload that spring. If you have good spring, if this is not painful and you have good balance, then we can start to let that foot spring off the floor. Get a little bit of a pop off of it as we unload onto our back foot, load onto that front foot. Good. Now we're going to bring our foot a little bit more straight as if we're taking a stride, not too big of a step. Now we're going to load only on the outside ball of the foot. So we're on that pinky toe side. Ball of the big toe is off the floor, heel is off the floor. Knee is lightly tracking out now. And we're doing the exact same thing. Simple load. Feel the load into the lateral arch of the foot and press and extend to shift your weight back. Inhale as you shift forward. Exhale as you push back. I'm keeping my foot in contact with the floor to start. Again, if this feels solid and stable and dynamic, then we can start to release that foot just a little bit. Get that spring to pop off the floor lightly. Nice absorption as we load it and a nice spring to unload it. Then we're going to go ahead and switch. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. So first one is stepping out to the side, slightly forward. Ball of the big toe is on the floor. Outside ball is off the floor. Heel is off the floor. Knee is tracking internally. Loading the ball, pressing back to shift our weight back. Keeping the foot in, both feet in contact with the floor to start with. Nice inhale. Can you feel that same springy nature of that medial arch of your foot? Or does it feel stiffer on one side compared to the other? That stiffness, that difference in one side is going to tell us how those springs are loaded. And if you got one that's stiffer than the other, that's going to be impact your gait mechanics. Once you got 5 up to 10, now we're going to let that heel come down and kiss the floor and then release. And at this point, if you feel stable, we can pop off that foot. Inhale, absorb, let the heel touch, and then nice spring as that heel pops off and we push through the ball of the big toe. My left foot, much stiffer, especially as I get into this pop. I can feel a little bit faster level of fatigue and a bigger stretch. So I want to keep this light. I don't want to force it. I probably want to do a little bit more foot mobility in the arch of the foot, maybe a lacrosse ball. Now we're going to switch to that outside ball of the foot. So foot's a little bit more straight in line. Knee is going to track out. Big toe is off the floor. Ball of big toe and heel are still off the floor. Inhale as we shift forward. Exhale as we shift back, keeping that foot in contact with the floor for the first 5 or so. Feel that load through the lateral arch of the foot. Can you feel that spring absorb energy as you shift forward? Can you feel it release as you push back? If this feels solid, dynamic, non-painful, then we can start to let that foot spring off the floor lightly. Load, feel the absorb, release. Once we get 5-10 reps, we're now going to bring that same foot we were just on into a nice stride forward, as if you're taking a normal gait step. Back foot, I want to keep it loaded on the floor, and I want to feel the ball of the foot spread as wide as we can. Most of the weight I want shifted forward. So I want to feel our weight on our front leg, but I want to feel grounded like you're digging through that nice spread ball of the foot. Ball of the big toe all the way to the pinky toe. From here, we're going to actively reach the heel to the floor, actively straighten your knee like you're pushing your knee back. I'm not doing this by shifting weight back. I'm keeping my weight forward, so it's got to be active reach. The heel does not need to touch the floor, but we're reaching as if it can. From here, we're going to dig or plant the ball of our foot, big toe all the way to the pinky toe. Dig into the floor. Allow the knee to soften as we drive that heel up to the ceiling. And then we're going to reach that heel and actively straighten the knee. Again, keeping our weight shifted forward. We'll do a good 5 of these. As we reach back, can you feel some stretch in the front of your hip as you actively straighten that knee and actively reach the heel? Then again, plant, drive the heel up to the ceiling. As you soften that knee, can you feel that stretch through the ball of the foot, maybe largely through the ball of the big toe? We're going to do 5 of these, back and forth. On the 5th one, we're going to let our knee roll out, and we're going to push only through the outside ball of the foot, doing everything else the same. So I'm loaded more to the ball of the pinky toe side as I actively straighten that knee, reaching the heel, then driving that outside edge into the floor, pushing the heel up to the ceiling as I let that knee soften, and then reaching it back again. Doing this for 5. Can you feel that outside edge of the ball of the foot loading into the floor? How much pressure can you get? Is it difficult? Is it challenging? Is it a little bit uncomfortable? I want to make sure it's not painful. After 5, we're going to press, and we're going to keep pressed, that heel pressed up to the ceiling. And from here, we're going to roll from the outside edge of the ball of the foot to the inside, big toe side ball of the foot. The knee is going to track in to out. As we load to the ball of the pinky toe side, knee is out. As we load to the ball of the big toe side, knee comes in. Doing that for about 5, and then we'll go ahead and switch. So again, taking a nice gait stride forward, weight shifts onto our front foot. Feel the spread and load, grounded load of that big toe or ball of the foot. Big toe all the way to pinky toe, loaded into the floor. Actively straighten that knee. Actively reach the heel down like you're trying to root into the floor without shifting your weight back. From here, we're going to ground through that spread ball of the foot, planting down, driving the heel up to the ceiling as we soften our knee, and then actively reach that heel back, actively straightening the knee. Again, making sure that we're not shifting our weight from our front, off our front leg. I want to keep that weight. Good 80% of our weight should be forward on our front leg as we go back and forth. Notice if this side feels different as far as how that foot is connected to the floor. How tight and stiff is it? Do you have a different level of mobility and motor control through this foot? My left foot tends to be stiffer, less mobile. So it's harder for me to stay grounded through the ball of the big toe all the way to the pinky toe. That pinky toe side is not as grounded as it is on my right side. And I can really feel that stretch on the ball of the big toe. After 5, we're going to roll out to the ball, the pinky toe side. That knee will track a little bit more out as we drive the pinky toe side, letting the knee bend, and then actively straightening the knee, reaching the heel to the floor. I want to feel that pressure through the ball, the pinky toe side. And again, this side is much more challenging for me. This is an area where I struggle to maintain good neurological motor control, largely because my left hip spirals internally, putting more load into the ball of the big toe in order to support me because of my right knee instability from having multiple surgeries and not having a ligament in that knee. So a lot of this is just a part of disability and dysfunction that I'm trying to continue to get the most function I possibly can out of it. Last one as part of this, as we reach back, we're now going to let that knee track from the ball of the big toe to the pinky toe, going back and forth. Feel that nice grounding action. Can you feel the pressure through the ball of the big toe? Can you feel it spread out and move to the ball of the pinky toe? Again, how does that feel on this side compared to the other side? All right, so now we're going to bring our feet more shoulder width apart, and we're going to get into some bowls of soup. So bowls of soup. We're going to start with our bowls of soup, only working our spirals up to the shoulder joint. So I want to keep the shoulder blades down. I don't want them to shrug up, at least not to start with. This is looking at our rotator cuff muscles of our shoulder. So we're going to spread the hands as wide as we can, turn the palms face up to the ceiling and beyond. How far can you spiral those elbows and long arms up towards the ceiling? Then we're going to spiral both sides internally. How far can you spiral both arms internally without your shoulders rolling up, coming up off your upper back? Exhale as we spiral up. We're going to inhale halfway through and then exhale again as we spiral in. So we're exhaling in both directions. Notice if there's a difference in how far you can externally spiral your right shoulder compared to your left shoulder. What do you feel up here? Look at your elbows, look at your hands. How far does the right side go compared to the left side? Is one side limited compared to the other side? Same thing with the internal spiral. Can you see or feel tension or tightness difference on one side compared to the other? We're then going to bring our arms up a little higher. Now, if you have any kind of shoulder impingement, I want you to come up only as high as you can without the impingement, without going into discomfort. If we can get all the way up to here, this is great. But if it's down here, this is fine. This is still a good place to do this work. I'm doing it up here. This is where my shoulders are able to do it. Palms are staying up. And now we're going to alternate from one side to the other, doing the exact same thing. Feel that spiral in. How far can you go without moving the shoulder blade? Spiral that palm up and out. How far can you go? Same thing on then going to the opposite side. As we elevate the arms, we're more likely to notice clunkiness in the shoulder. And that's something I want to pay attention to, because that clunkiness is going to be an indication that the rotator cuff muscles are out of balance and they're not maintaining the ball of the humerus inside that socket as smooth and as efficiently as it can or should. There's some inefficiency in it. It's making it clunky. We want to notice that because this is something we want to smooth out so that we can get good shoulder function, good shoulder efficiency. Lower shoulder efficiency means higher possibilities for friction, grinding, pinch, causing this pain and injury. All right, so now we're going to start to allow the shoulder blades to get involved. So as we round forward, we're going to let those shoulder blades start to roll up and over the top. And then we're coming all the way back as we go to the other side. Now we get into that upper back area. As you spiral in and forward, can you feel that stretch across the upper back, top of the shoulders back, or really upper back area of the shoulders, closer to the spine. I got a little bit more clunkiness in that left shoulder. All right, one last thing we're going to do standing up with shoulders is we're going to play with the same bowl of soup, but we're going to be taking it through a range of motion across our body. And we're going to bring this and do the same thing in our baby rolls later. So I want to get comfortable with this nice opening action. As I'm starting out with my thumb down, touching my opposite hip. And I want to bring that arm to an exact diagonal. Elbow is straight, and as I'm bringing it up, I'm spiraling that palm up, that thumb up to the ceiling and beyond. And I want to find this nice Y position at a direct diagonal from that hip. Coming all the way back down, nice opening up as I spiral. Now, if you deal with dizziness or imbalance, then I want you to stay here as long as this feels safe. You can also have a staff if that helps. If you have good balance, not worried about dizziness, I want to now let our eyes follow our hand. As our hand comes up, we're following it and we are looking away. And I want to see if we can start to reach back and beyond, like I'm extending out as I'm continuing to spiral beyond the midline of my body, then bringing it all the way back. Eyes are following all the way through. We're going to do this same action in our baby rolls. I want to get an idea of how far can I reach. Is there immobility? I don't want to go into pain, so I want to pay attention to pain in the shoulder as I'm doing this. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Thumb starts on that opposite hip. Nice opening up as we spiral in that direct diagonal from the hip and reaching away as we do so and then bringing it all the way back. Notice if it feels different on one shoulder compared to the other. We're looking at things through that understanding of our gait mechanics and how these spirals can be impacting into the hip. So if there's a difference in one shoulder compared to the other, that's going to be a big deal. We can start to bring in our eyes if we have good balance. As we open up, let the eyes follow. And as we open up, we can continue to spiral the palm as we start to extend beyond the midline of the body. Again, how does this feel? Is there a greater tension on one side? Do you have less mobility on one side? All right, we're now going to come all the way down to the floor. And we're going to get into our V-sit. So we just got some decent spiral action through the shoulders. Now I want to do the same thing in the hips. So get in a nice, comfortable wide as you can comfortably be V-sit. Actively reaching the knees down to the floor. I want to maintain active knees the entire time. Actively pulling the tops of the feet back like you're trying to touch your shins with your foot. This is going to help create a little bit of traction in the hips. Hands can come down to the hips, nice grounded hands, and I want to spiral those elbows out and away so that we feel our shoulder blades roll back and down, and we can get a nice open chest lifted up to the ceiling. So I want, again, this is the position I want to maintain. Active knees, active foot, active external spiral through the shoulders so that we're nice and tall in the spine. Now we're going to focus on our knees, kneecaps. Want to turn those kneecaps out like you're trying to touch the floor on the outside of your legs as you exhale. We're going to inhale at center, and then we're going to exhale as we try to touch the knees to the inside of the floor. Now, obviously, you should probably not be able to touch your knees to the floor. If you do, I'm very interested to meet you. We're actively reaching because I want to get that maximum range of motion of spiral through the femur, the ball of the femur up in that hip socket. And I want to notice how much do I move externally through that right kneecap. How far does it turn out compared to the left knee? does one side go farther? Does one side feel tighter and more tense? Same thing with the internal. And as you start to notice that there are minor differences in these assessments, start to connect it to what you noticed in your shoulders. Sometimes you're going to have the same side is going to be off. So it's going to be hip and the same side shoulder. But most of the time, I'm going to say about 80% of the time, you're going to have an oppositional relationship. One side hip to the opposite shoulder. And these are kind of normal patterns that we want to pay attention to. Because you got to understand, you might feel pain in your shoulder, and it's going to be related to the lack of mobility in the spiral in your hip. You might have pain in the foot, in the knee, in the hip, or the low back, and it could be related to the lack of spiral in your shoulder. And it could be the opposite side shoulder, where you don't feel any kind of pain whatsoever. We're going to come back to center, keeping those knees actively reaching down. And now we're going to do a little bit of light fold work just to get some length on the back line of the leg. So nice inhale as we're tall. Exhale, we're going to reach both hands evenly and only going as far as you can keep both even. Inhale brings it all the way back. Nice exhale on the reach. Inhale as you bring it back. And with each one, we're seeing if we can squeeze a little bit more farther into it without going into pain or excessive discomfort. Light 1 or 2 on the scale of 0 to 10. I do not want to go into a 3 or above. Once you've gotten 5 or so going forward, maybe 5 to 10, then we're going to start to deviate a little bit side to side. So we're moving a little to the right and then a little bit to the left. It's a good one to notice how does it feel differently on the right side compared to the left side. We can continue to bring it out, reaching more directly out to the heels. My left side is a little tighter. Again, my left hip tends to be stuck in a bit of compression in order to support my right knee. Good. All right. We're now going to switch and come to our hands and knees. And we're going to let our knees go as wide as comfortable. We're going to get into our nice frog position. So my knees are wide. My feet are staying close together. They can touch or they cannot touch, but they should be pretty close to touching. Fingers are spread, palms are grounded. From here, we're inhaling at the top. On the exhale, we're going to let our hips sink back. And as your hips sink back, turn your tailbone lightly up towards the ceiling as you sit back. Inhale, we're coming back forward. Exhale, we're getting that nice sink, hips to heels. Right now I have my ankles flat, my toes are untucked. And I want to get a good feel for what are you sensing on the right hip compared to the left hip, especially in the adductor in front of the anterior hip space. Is one side tighter, more restricted than the other side? As you're starting to feel that, you can slightly aim your tailbone like you're trying to reach it lightly towards your right heel. And then when you come up on the next one, slightly angle like you're trying to reach it towards your left heel. This is playing with a little bit of rotation through the sacrum, through the hips, and kind of isolates one hip joint over the other. How does that right side feel compared to the left side? I want this to feel good and juicy, not stressful and painful. So if it's feeling stressful and painful, I want you to back off. Next, as we come up to the top, we're going to go ahead and tuck the toes. And because of the position, it's going to largely be the big toe that's going to be tucked underneath. And we're going to do the exact same thing, starting with just sitting back right through the middle, turning that tailbone lightly up to the ceiling. Inhale as we come forward. Exhale as we shift back. I want to feel the weight of that shift back in the ball of the foot. This gets to be a little bit of big toe mobility, but we're also feeling it in the hip. So I want to keep that mobility work in the hip as well. So I'm not working on one over the other. Good. Once we come back up to the top, we're going to untuck the toes. We're going to let ourselves sit back into light tension. And now we're going to work another area, part of our spirals through the hip. We're going to lightly lift one ankle at a time up towards the ceiling, and then let that back down and do the same thing on the other side. Light rotation. Lift that heel up, back down. We're exhaling as we lift. Should feel that spiral action in the front of that hip socket. How does that feel on the left hip compared to the right hip? Again, all these assessment points. Noticing how do these spirals function. You can think of these spiral actions like compression springs. If they have good elastic mobility, then they're going to be able to absorb and release energy well. If they are stiff and immobile, they're going to work like very stiff and immobile springs. It's going to feel like a big hard clunk every time you hit a speed bump. And that jolt's going to go through the bones, the long bones. It doesn't get absorbed well through the soft tissue. You're going to feel it as a big clunk. All right. Now we're going to get into our shin box position. I'm starting in my left side shin box. My left palm is grounded down. I want to have that elbow again spiraled out and away so that we feel that shoulder blade rolled back. Nice open chest. And we're now going to move the opposite direction of the spiral that we just did in the frog by lightly lifting that knee up towards the ceiling and then placing it back down. Nice kiss to the floor. Exhale as you lift and squeeze. I don't want to shift a whole lot through the rest of my body. I want to be pretty fixed through this shoulder, so I don't want to feel my whole body rotate and move as I lift that knee. If you feel that you have to move your whole body, that means that hip is stiff. I want to get a true assessment. If you're only able to bring that knee so high, that's fine. That's where you're at. Work with where you're at. It will get better if you work on it. We're slow squeeze up, inhale down. Notice how high that knee is able to go so that we can compare it to the other side, which we'll do now. We're going to slowly transition across to the other side, and we're doing the same thing. Grounded palm, spiral that elbow out and away. Feel that shoulder blades packed down, chest is kind of lifted and open. Lifting up that opposite hip, that opposite knee up to the ceiling. Exhale as you lift, inhale as you bring it back down. How does this side move compared to the other side? This is much stiffer on me. My left hip, again, is the stiffer hip. This is the area where I am most immobile in this hip. I get a lot of anterior compression in this hip. Again, this is where my body stabilizes. Think of that Tensegrity tool. This is where I have compression in order to stabilize for what I don't have enough stability in my right knee. If you have instability somewhere, your body has to stabilize that elsewhere, right? Because where you're unstable, you don't have the ability to stabilize it. So that stability's got to come from somewhere. For me, it's my opposite hip. Go ahead and switch back to the other side. And now we're going to get into our folds. And we're going to do folds. We'll start with folds going one side to the other, but we're going to kind of bring in that spiral through the transition, shin box transition. So I want that front leg a little bit open. I don't want that heel really tightly tucked in. I want to have it out in a way so that we can be square with the front of that shin. I want to have shoulders as square as possible. To start with, we're going to reach through that shin, both hands evenly, seeing how far can we reach even. I don't want one hand going further than the other. Inhale, we're bringing it all the way back. As we get this fold, I don't want to drop at my chest or my head where I'm rounding my back. I want to try to keep my torso long, my spine long as I reach. Eyes kind of stay up, seeing how far can I fold. Inhale, coming all the way back up. And with each one, we're seeing if we can fold and reach a little bit further. And noticing where do you feel that tension, tightness at? Do you feel it in the hip, the glute of the front leg? Do you feel it in the front of the back hip? Or do you feel it in your low back? Once we've done 5 to 10, we're going to do a nice slow transition all the way across. This slow transition is working that same spiral through the hip, getting that knee in place. Shoulders are square with the shin. Nice inhale at the top, exhale as both hands reach forward. Again, keeping the spine long, not dropping the chest or the head. Inhale, coming all the way back up. With each one, we're seeing if we can reach a little bit further. And this is where we can find some interesting things. So my left anterior hip, when all the other stuff is tight, now I'm feeling tightness on my right glute, which is oppositional in nature to the left hip. This is a pattern. Front of my left hip, back of my right glute. If my left hip is immobile, it's going in the front, it's going to prevent me from getting access to my glute on the opposite side. Immobility in one place is going to prevent mobility elsewhere. Right? Again, that comes back to that tensegrity concept. Once we get our 5 to 10 on this side, now we're going to start working side to side. Again, nice slow transition as we go across. We're spiraling. I want to feel those hips as we move from one side. Nice slow fold. Inhale. Nice slow spiral across to the other side. We're going to do a good 10 slow reps. The slower, the better. This is an area where no matter how slow you're going, you can always go slower, especially if there is pain. You need to slow down even more. Once we get 3 or up to 5 times back and forth, now we're going to start to change the position of that back hip. We're going to let that back hip slide open a little bit more. I'm no longer worried about staying square with my shin. I'm just getting a nice, comfortable fold. And at this point, I want to be a little bit more exploratory in my movement. I'm not trying to do it perfectly square. I'm exploring space. I'm noticing where I move well. And then more importantly, I want to notice where I don't move as well, especially when it's on one side and not on the other. And if you find an area where it's hard, it's more challenging to explore, then that would be an area to explore. Not forcefully, not painfully, But if you cannot do a movement, then you have to assume that you lack neurology of that movement. And the only way we're going to get both the neurology of the movement back and the movement itself back is to start working on getting into that movement. You cannot build neurology without practicing the very movement that neurology supports. We're continuing to slide that back leg open more and more. I'm not so concerned about getting into a true yoga class pigeon pose. If you can, great. Find that full end range. If you cannot, I'm only interested in exploring where it's challenging and non-painful, with the idea that you will slowly increase that range by practicing this every day over days, weeks, months, and years. It's not going to come back overnight. All right. We're now going to get into our inverted position. Palms are coming grounding down to the floor. We're coming back and we're going to get into our arm spiral action again. Basically looking at like an inverted cat-cow. So nice grounded palms. We're going to let the elbows spiral internally. As they spiral internally, notice how the shoulders round forward and want to reach up to the ears so that we get this nice big rounded upper back. Feel that nice stretch in the upper back. Then we're going to press down and feel those shoulder blades spiral out as we feel those shoulder blades roll back and slide down towards the floor and lift the sternum up to the ceiling. We're going to inhale. As we externally spiral, we're going to exhale as we internally spiral, feeling this nice rounding of our back. Inhale as you spiral out and get nice and tall. And I want to feel that breath, that inhale breath, moving up into our upper chest as much as possible. So as you're externally spiraling, also focus that inhale into lifting up into really almost like you're breathing right into into the clavicular level where your clavicles are at. And while we're doing this, notice the difference on how does these spirals through the shoulders feel on the left side compared to the right side. Does one shoulder feel stronger, more connected? Does one shoulder feel weaker, maybe a little unstable? Does it feel just tighter and more restricted? My left shoulder, external spiral, a lot more tension, a lot tighter than the right one. On the next one, as you inhale, getting tall, we're going to stay tall. At this point, you can cross your legs if you want, but we're staying grounded down, external spiral, chest is lifted, tall spine. And we're going to get into a little bit of light neck mobility, starting with checking our blind spots. Nice exhale as you check your right shoulder. Inhale as we come to center. Exhale as you check your left shoulder. We'll do 5 of these back and forth. With each one, try to squeeze that chin as far over the edge of the shoulder as you can. And notice the difference of the left side and the right side. Whichever side of your shoulder has more restriction than the other, say my left side, you're probably going to find more tightness and restriction on that side of the neck. Now again, it could be the opposite side, but most of the time it's going to be same side. Neck immobility will cause shoulder immobility. Shoulder immobility will cause neck immobility. You have to work on both. You can't just work on one. If you work on just the neck, the shoulder will continue to pull the neck back into tightness. If you only work on the shoulder, the neck will pull the shoulder back into tightness. So we have to work on both. And then we also have to remember that this is also connected down into the hips. So if we don't work on the hips with this, right, we have to work on the entire system, one piece at a time, and then connecting them all together. So next, we're going to get into our kind of checking our blind spots, turning towards our shoulder as far as we can. And from here, we're going to let our gaze go up to the ceiling as high as we can, and then down towards the floor as low as we can. I want to continue to squeeze into that rotation. I'm still actively trying to turn my chin over my shoulder as I'm moving through, looking down and looking up. Again, and notice, where does it feel tight and tense? Where does it feel restricted? And then we're going to do the same thing to the other side. Active rotation looking over the shoulder. Keep that active rotation as you look down and let your gaze go up. And we're seeing how far can you go in each side. Does it feel different on the left side compared to the right side? We're going to bring it back across to that original side. Active rotation, looking down. And then from active rotation looking down, we're now going to do a diagonal up and across to active rotation looking up and away. So as I go from down and away, I'm going diagonal across to up and away. From up and away, I want to keep it on the same side and change my turn down. And from here, down and away, we're going to go diagonal up and across into that active up and away. And then down, and then diagonal across to up and away. We're basically making a nice big figure 8, crossing the front midline with that figure 8. How smooth does this feel as you move across from one side to the other? Is it different on the left compared to the right? On the next one, as you're up and away, bringing it to down and away. Now we're going to start with down and away. We're going to go back up to up and away, and we're going to go diagonal across down and away. From down and away to up and away, and diagonal across down. So basically just reversing the direction of our figure 8. But again, I want to be very actively trying to look over that, turn that chin over that shoulder when we are both down and away and up and away. All right, you shake out the arms a little bit. We can come off the shoulders. Now we're going to get onto our back. We're going to do some light baby rolls. So on back, I want to have feet about hip width or shoulder width apart, not quite hip width, so they can be a little bit spread. Toes are pointing straight up to the ceiling, and I want to have a little bit of downward pressure through the heels. If you load the heels down, you should kind of notice that your hips get a little tense. Your glutes kind of light up just a little bit. I don't want to lift the hips up, but I want to have just enough tension down that you feel the hips engaged. Arms are going to come up into a Y position. If you find that arms or shoulders are stiff, the further out you bring those arms until the elbows can be softly on the floor is fine. From here, we can start with our right hand. We're going to bring our right hand across our body and touch our opposite shoulder. And then as we bring it back across, we're going to spiral that thumb out and away as we bring it back into that Y. This is what we are doing in our standing position. I just want to feel this action because we're going to try to bring this action into some of our baby roll stretches. So do like 3 to 5 on one side, and then we're going to do 3 to 5 on the other side. And notice if it's more challenging? Is it painful on one side? My left shoulder is weaker, unstable, and I'm going to say it's a level 1 discomfort in some of these positions, especially right here as I'm bringing it close to the floor. Once I'm on the floor, I'm fine, but there's an active point in that range of motion where my shoulder, it's not the happiest. So I have to be very, very soft and subtle with it. We're going to bring those arms back to the floor. Now we're going to reach across. Left arm is going to reach across towards the right arm. Again, both heels stay on the floor. As I reach, your hip is allowed to get lifted off the floor. Inhale, you're bringing it all the way back, and you're going to go across to the other side. I don't want to lose contact with the heels on the floor. If you feel one heel wants to lift, then make sure try to do your best to keep it grounded on the floor. I want to make sure that this is not painful on the low back. So be very cautious with how far you are moving into it. If you're able to get into this movement without pain, then we can add one more thing. As we reach, getting into some light tension of our baby roll stretch. I want to be very cautious in this light tension. We're going to do a bowl of soup. Spiraling that arm in, spiraling it out as we're reaching away. So we have traction moving from fingertip through our shoulder as we're spiraling through that shoulder. Fingers are spread nice and wide. We'll bring it across and down and go across to the opposite side. Nice long reach, making sure we're not in pain. Spread hands, slow, small spiral through the arm to start with. How does it feel on this side compared to the other side? We're going to bring it back down to the floor. Now we're going to reach across through our legs. So we can lift one leg up off the floor. I want to keep that leg elevated a little bit. I don't want to let it drop to the floor. Imagine that you're kind of reaching up onto a bed or a couch or a chair. As we reach, the hip is obviously going to come off the floor, and it's allowed to lift your opposite shoulder lightly off the floor. Try to keep a little bit of contact with the back of the hand, maybe just the fingernails. Inhale as you bring it back across. Exhale as we reach across to the other side. Making sure we are not moving into pain. I want to be very slow, methodical, cautious. I do not want to exacerbate pain in the spine. As you are getting into this movement, feeling its non-painful range, we're going to reach, allowing that hand to come lightly off the shoulder, off the floor, as long as this is not painful in the shoulder. Spread the hand, and again, we're going to do our bowl of soup very, very lightly. We have a lot of tension in the shoulder, so I want to go slow as we spin that ball of the humerus a little bit. And as we get into it, we can kind of squeeze into it as long as it is not painful. How much range of motion do you have? I'm continuing to reach through my toes as I'm spiraling through the shoulder. And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Nice reach, extend those toes, let it bring the fingers off the floor just a little bit as long as it's not painful. And then nice slow spirals. This is where my immobility in my left shoulder really comes up. This is the range of motion that I have most limited on in this shoulder. And it's actually a really small range of motion. The amount of limitation I have in the shoulder is relatively minor
compared to overall shoulder, functional shoulder mobility. But this minor immobility is a major problem in my gait mechanics. So it's part of the reason I want to assess is because even small imbalances can magnify as they cross from one joint into other joints. All right, we're going to slowly come all the way back up to standing. We've just done a lot of movement on the floor, some of it with some twisting. I want to make sure that we're not dizzy, lightheaded, but we're going to come all the way back up to standing. We got one more thing that we're going to work on, and we're getting back into the spirals of our hips. So we're going to get into our nice wide V stance. Toes are facing forward. I want to have good tripod feet. So I want to make sure our feet are spread wide and that we're grounded. Ball of the pinky toe, I want to feel that grounding. Ball of the big toe grounded. Heel is grounded. I don't want to feel any of those points lifting up through the first part of what we're doing here. From here, we're working on what I call step under progressions. We're going to let our hips sink to one side. I want to feel the weight of that hip pushing down into that heel, but not lifting up through the ball of the foot. Coming up back to center, and then same thing on the other side. Now, as I sink to one side, I don't want my opposite side foot to roll. I don't want to lose contact of that ball of the pinky toe. So I have to press into that ball of the big toe, pinky toe as I shift away from it. Inhale comes back up, same thing. Keep that ball of the pinky toe loaded on the floor. One other coaching point here. I don't want my weight shifting forward. Notice how my knee is going over toes. If my knees go over toes, it's going to lift my heel off the floor. I want to keep my heel on the floor right now, so I want my hips going back, not sliding forward. So if we're maintaining those points, as we go back and forth, we're seeing how low can we go on each side, maintaining that grounded pinky toe, weight of our hips and our heels, weight shifted back through our hips. I'm also keeping my chest elevated. I don't want to drop head and shoulders as we do this. I want to stay upright so I can see in front of me. Now, however low you're able to go on one side, we're now going to work glide across. So as we get to one side, we're going to glide across to the other side. Again, as I glide across, I don't want to lose that ball of the pinky toe from one side to the other. This should have a nice flossing effect through those adductors of the inner thighs. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to start to add in the spirals of the leg. So as you move to one side, you can lock in that elbow just to brace your core. And we're now going to release the ball of the foot on that opposite side, and we're going to spin that knee up towards the ceiling. Now, as we spin that knee up, we're also trying to sink into our opposite hip a little bit deeper. I want to feel mobility, rotational mobility, that bowl of soup action in the hip. And I want to let ourselves sink to see if we can feel our glute get active. Can you feel a little stretch in the glute on the opposite side? And then doing the same thing on the other side. Release that foot, spiral the knee up. As you do that, can you sink into your hip a little bit more? We'll come back up to standing once we're even on both sides. That is actually a really good assessment for those rotator cuffs, rotator muscles of the hips. If one side felt tighter, that's going to be a big deal. That tighter rotation in the hip is going to cause that, especially if it's internal, is going to cause that knee to spiral in, which is going to create changes in the shape of your spine, and it tends to mean that low back pain. So that's one of a great movement to work on, especially if you tend to get knee pain, hip pain, back pain when you walk and hike. Coming back to our nice big C shapes with our hands, thumbs in the back, index fingers in the rear. We're going to get a good 5, 6 slow, deep breaths, filling up that crocodile breath, expanding that balloon. Full exhale, feel the navel draw into the spine. Notice if you're able to get a bigger breath through that abdominal wall than at the beginning of the session. You may also find that it's more limited. We tax the body out a little bit. You may find that your breath is a little bit taxed as well. Once you get to 5 or 6, let's let the arms soften down. And now I want to let that breath come up into our chest, upper back area. Breathing in, feel the ribs expand. We're still feel that expansion through the abdominal wall, but I want to allow it to come up. On the exhale, allow your shoulders to soften. You can imagine we're breathing up and filling up tension. And on the exhale, we're allowing that tension to just rinse off. You can feel it shake off the hands, dripping down to the floor. If you feel any extra tension, you can do some shoulder rolls, do some shrugs, you can add some shakes. Let that stuff break off, slough off. And when you're ready, let it go and get on with our day.